Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Hi, Jeff.
Brett.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good.
You are?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Just good? All right? What you
No, man. Like just hitting in all cylinders, I think.
Hitting all cylinders.
If I was a 4-cylinder, but if I was a 6-cylinder, maybe only 4. I don't know. I'm good. You?
4 out of 6?
Not bad, right? That's failing.
That's what we're getting.
That's a failing grade.
Is this how we're...
No, I feel good. I feel good. How about you?
You feel good. You look good. I feel same. I feel good.
Right back at you.
Feeling good. Life is good. We have so much to be thankful for.
Yes.
We're blessed. It's 61 and sunny out here in South Florida, and the rest of the country is either under snow or rain.
Or a river of rain.
A river of rain.
Right,
so
exactly.
Our thoughts go out to anyone who's struggling with weather-related events. Any regrets, Brett? And is there anything that, like, any significant something in your life?
No, I don't. I actually don't think about it that way, because whether I've made a decision that ultimately didn't end up well or whatever happened, to me, it's an experience upon which I've built where I am today. And it's a life experience, right? So I don't really look back and say I regret doing that. I just take a lesson from something that may not have turned out the way that I initially thought it turned out. But that doesn't mean it was a bad decision or I regret doing something.
Right.
It may be something that I thought, okay, well, I'm going to learn from that and then try not to make the same mistake or do something different. And that's kind of how I look at it.
That's good.
How about
It's a great
you?
way to look at it. I think it's, they say there are no bad decisions. You either find success or you have a lesson.
Right.
You prevail or you learn from the mistake.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's something I'm working on. I have some regrets in life, but
Other than
decisions
this partnership? No, okay.
Exactly. Other than
Right.
my 2 significant partnerships, the one with you and my wife. Hi, Jelly. Don't worry, she won't be listening. She won't have heard that. I'm excited about having a new guest on the show.
He's so new that he's old.
He's not so new. Yeah, he's not so new. Our guest today is Brian Tannebaum. Brian is special counsel at Bast Amron, and he chairs the Ethics, Professional Responsibility, and White Collar Defense Group here. Brian represents law firms as well as future, current, and former judges, lawyers, and any legal professionals in matters before the Florida Bar, before the Judicial Qualifications Commission, before the Board of Bar Examiners, as well as civil and criminal courts around the state and probably around the country. But Brian has been counsel in over 100 Florida Bar matters before the Florida Supreme Court. He's also been appointed as a special master by the 11th Judicial Circuit in Miami-Dade County. He's a past chair of the Innocence Project of Florida, and he was past president of the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in its Miami chapter. He has served as a member of both the Executive Council of the Florida Bar Criminal Law Section of the Florida Bar and the Florida Bar Criminal Procedures Rules Committee. He's also appointed as a member and a vice chair of a Florida Bar Grievance Committee. I mean, I can just go on and on. I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I say perhaps his greatest achievement, besides his beautiful family, is that Brian was the very first guest to appear on this podcast. And that was episode 41. And I think we're recording maybe 141 or 140. We're right around there somehow. So
I feel like that should be first on his bio.
Yeah, you should put that. First guest on the practice. Welcome back, Brian.
Wait. That's not ingrained in your memory?
It has made my day to know that I was the first guest. I did not know.
First ever guest.
Yeah.
And it's still going.
Yeah. And we're,
and we didn't end it there. I mean, we could have.
And you can tell that we've run out of all guests because here you are again.
Right.
We're back to the beginning of this.
But he is not the first repeat guest.
No, but maybe the most important repeat guest.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
We've only had 2 repeat guests now.
Yeah, this
Brian
will be
being
our
the second. Correct.
Yeah.
Wow.
Welcome back, Brian.
Honored. Thank you.
What have you done in those 4 years or so?
100 episodes ago. What have you done?
I got through COVID like everybody else, and I got a little healthy and kept working, and I'm an empty nester now. I wasn't when I was the guest for the first time.
Look how relaxed he looks.
Let's talk about that, because I think as a lawyer, you obviously grow from being a young lawyer to a senior lawyer or a partner or whatever it is you grow. But your life happens at the same time. And I think you get better at being a lawyer at a time when, you're also becoming a parent and growing a family. And so you're learning both of these things at the same time. And then suddenly you don't have your kids there anymore and you still have this practice of law. And so I'm curious what your Any reflections on that process of getting to this point and now you have all this free time? What are you going to do?
So I will tell you, the first thing that happens when you become an empty nester is you realize the significant change in your schedule. And that there is none. So when you have kids, even when they're older, you want to be home for dinner. They have something the next day. They're still in high school, so you want to be there to send them off to school. And then all of a sudden, it's Tuesday. You wake up and nobody's in the house, and nobody needs to be anywhere. And so you have a lot more freedom to not have, well, we got to be home by 4. We got to be at the school at 3 o'clock. We got to be here. It's like we don't have anything to do except I have to work and come home, and we can maybe go away on a Wednesday and a Thursday instead of a Friday and a Saturday kind of thing. So the scheduling thing is huge. The freedom is life-changing, but you miss your kids. You miss your kids a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've heard rumors that you actually don't stop being a parent when they leave.
You heard
I've heard a rumor about that, but I'm a few years away from empty nesting.
The issues change.
Yes.
Right now, my youngest is in Madrid doing her semester abroad, and my oldest is in her 3rd year at General Motors in Detroit, and the issues just change. But you're still a parent, and you're still dealing with a lot of different things.
Right. And it's a true test of your relationship with your spouse, because you're kind of left in the house and like you said, there's nobody else there. It's like, hey, hi. Oh, hi. How are you?
Hey.
Who are you? Right.
How are you?
There's a lot more of the two of you together. Mm-hmm. And as my wife says to me frequently, why don't you go find something to do?
Hide in your wine cellar. Like where?
This could explain.
There he is. He's in the wine cellar again.
This could explain why Brian's here today. Because Lisa might have sent him, hey, why don't you go be on a podcast today or
he
something?
Comes downtown infrequently, but it's certainly not of his own volition.
So when I get a lunch invitation, she says, absolutely, go, please. I mean, have a long lunch, enjoy yourself.
That's great.
Well, so to pick up on that, I do think that it is important, right? Because as you said, Brian, right? Like when we have kids at home, our schedules are consumed by, number one, obviously we have work, and number two, not in that order, being a parent and going around and taking care of our kids and going to events and all that stuff. And then they're gone and you still have work. But to me, it's like, that's the point, obviously trying to do it beforehand, but that's the point where each of you, right, meaning your spouse and you, have to have something for yourself, right? A hobby or something you like to do or things you want to, meaningful relationships outside of your marriage, right?
Yes.
You have to cultivate that along the way as well, in addition to becoming really good at being a lawyer and a father and a spouse.
Yes, and lucky for me, my wife has a tremendous amount of friends that she does a lot of things with. I'm a little more of a homebody, and I like to hang out with my dog and watch the news. So we do have that separation, and we both have things. I like to write a lot, and I like to read things, and she goes out with her friends. And so we do have things that we do apart from each other, which is much more important when the kids are gone, because like you said, Jeff, it's like, hey, how are you? Oh, you're here. Yeah,
right.
Let's have dinner together every night. Without the kids, it's like, maybe not,
No more than 2 nights a week.
Right.
Go figure it out. Right. Yeah. So that's the point where you need to know how to be on your own, come up with things you like to do and refocus on that and focus on meaningful relationships outside of the marriage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Becomes more important.
Yes.
So now that you're doubling back and refocusing on career, right? I think as Jeff said in the opening in your bio, and everyone who's listening to this knows who you are and what you do. But I always like to say you're the lawyer of lawyers, right? You're a lawyer for lawyers, and any lawyer that has an issue calls you, as they should. And if anybody's listening now, they have an issue or they think they have an issue, call Brian. But one of the hot topics, and we were just sort of going back, talking about this a few minutes ago, is ethics and the focus of the Florida bar on ethics. And what have you seen recently or over the last 5, 10 years, whatever it is, trend of their focus on the ethical side or ethics side of the practice of law?
Well, the issues kind of remain the same as a baseline, right? We have lawyers who lie. We have lawyers who cheat. We have lawyers who steal. We have lawyers who get arrested. But more frequently, what I'm seeing is a focus on civility. Anyone who's a member of the Florida Bar knows that we have added a civility paragraph to the oath. And the bar has now started prosecuting lawyers for violating that oath. And we have tried very hard in the practice to be more civil, to be more professional. I have to tell you, I think things are getting worse.
Yeah.
And the reason I think they're getting worse is because of technology. Most of the incivility that I see is in email, text messages. I was just watching a Zoom deposition of a lawyer who was not being civil. And the problem too now with technology is that you see it, right? So you could read a transcript years ago or talk to another lawyer and say, oh, I was in this deposition and this happened. But now as you just go on YouTube and it's right there that afternoon, somebody's posted a clip from the deposition. And I don't know why it's happening. I think it's happening because there's a lot more pressure in the practice to do things quicker, and lawyers are getting more stressed out. And so they tend to react. There's also lawyers that are just not nice people and they just cannot behave themselves. And so I see these email chains and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And the profanity and the threats. And the bar is now saying, look, we're going to prosecute you for this behavior. And it's concerning because lawyers get upset about it and they say, well, but this wasn't really a case, or this wasn't my client, or I was out at a place and I was arguing with this person. Why is the bar coming after me? Because the bar looks at you as the lawyer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're not being civil to a vendor, to a shopkeeper, to someone at a gas station, or in a deposition, or in court, the bar has the authority to prosecute you, and they will, and they're doing that.
What is I know you don't have it committed to memory, but what's the gist of the civility part of the oath?
Just well, it says that you will maintain civility in all communications, right? Okay. So you will maintain a civil manner of discourse.
Okay.
And that includes granting reasonable extensions of time. And I just did a thing for the bar. They're coming out with a professionalism video, and they asked me to do like the top 10 things about ethics and professionalism. One of the things I talked about was this extension of time thing, where you call a lawyer and say, hey, can I have an extension of time? And it's very reasonable, 10 days, 20 days, maybe 30 days. And the lawyer says, well, I need to talk to my client. I tell lawyers, you should talk to your client when they hire you and say, listen, let me tell you how I work. When a lawyer calls me and asks me for an extension of time, I'm going to give it to them because of two reasons. Number one, I'm going to need one. And number two, if they're asking for 10, 20, 30 days, by the time I get to a judge, it's not going to matter anyway. So I need you to understand that this is how I'm going to do this. When lawyers don't do that and they respond with well, let me talk to my client, it creates anxiety on the other side. Sometimes, it gets a little heated. And so I think lawyers need to calm down. They need to back away from the computer and take a break. Take a walk, as I say. But I think the availability of communication 24 hours a day is what is causing incivility.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. No, I want to push back a little on this whole extension of time thing, because I suspect that the majority of instances where a request for an extension causes any kind of, civility issue is when there's already been a delay. The defendant was avoiding service, and then they had a lawyer make a phone call and say, oh, I'm going to enter an appearance. And then that guy doesn't appear. And then the next guy comes in, and then he waits until after the deadline and asks for 30 days. And then it's, okay, I got to talk to my client. So, and the problem is, like you said, they file their motion. We have this in a few cases. They file the motion for extension. Then they don't set it for hearing. We had a lawyer do this to us. It was delay. Then he files motion for extension, doesn't set it for hearing. So we go to set it for hearing, but we have to clear the date with them. They won't respond to the dates. Then he finally agrees, okay, we're going to submit an order, won't respond to the form of the order. So the situation is not always, black and white, one way or the other.
However, every time I bring this up, I get pushback. And I get the exact pushback you just gave me. And so the second part of that issue is that I'm talking about a complaint's been filed. The lawyer picks up the phone and calls and says, hey, I just got this complaint. The answer's due in 3 days. Can I have an extra 20 or 30 days? And the lawyer says, well, I'm not talking about repeat offenders. I'm not talking about problem lawyers. I'm not talking about people evading service. And I'm not talking about the second, third, fourth request for an extension of time. I'm talking about just the nature of how things work. if you file a civil complaint against someone, there's about 100% chance that the first request you're going to get is for an extension of time.
No, I agree.
So talk to the client and say, listen, here's what's going to happen. If they ask again, I'm going to ask what the reason is. Because again, judges will give more than one, and it depends. If someone calls and says, look, my daughter's in the hospital, I have a flat tire, whatever, you don't want to be in front of a judge looked at as being unreasonable.
Yeah, I do think at least some of the civility issues we encounter are a product of the system, because the system doesn't do anything to police, enforce it. And so it puts this burden. If I'm a lawyer in a case and the other lawyer is being uncivil, I don't know if that's the right word. Uncivil and making threats or just being a jackass. I have this situation. What am I to do? Do I go to court and now I look like an idiot because I'm tattling to the judge or the Florida bar? And so we have this, the system doesn't really police itself for that. And most of the judges don't care. They don't really do anything. If you raise it at a hearing, then they start challenging you. And, so we have this sort of impossible situation where the only way to raise it is file a bar complaint. It's really not a great outlet.
It's a great question. So the only thing judges care about is when it happens in front of them.
Right.
Even then.
Right. But I'm saying in terms of when they may address it, right? They hear about lawyers arguing. They guys, behave yourselves, or girls, behave yourselves, whatever. Like, they're not looking to get involved unless it's something really serious, like a threat or just something that's off the chain. But I tell lawyers this. You practice law the way you practice law. Don't ever practice law the way someone else practices law. So if someone's being a jerk and they're doing it in email or letters or whatever, you just stay below the fray and do the things that you need to do, because eventually something's going to happen. It's going to get in front of the judge. Something's going to be said. Filing a bar complaint, I think, is a last resort, honestly, on this kind of stuff. And I just think that lawyers that I see that constantly behave this way, they eventually get their due. It just happens. And especially
but we're not there to see it. So that's what pleasure is there in that?
Well, right. Well, eventually what I see is, I'll see something and then months later I'll see, now this lawyer's in trouble because of the same.
But that is no solace to you and your client who are dealing with this particular lawyer in a particular matter, right? You're trying to move it along, and the lawyer is lying, cheating, stealing, whatever, and being nasty and having problems. And, like you said, the judge, both of you go and behave. And when you're not doing anything and it's really one-sided, I like that the bar is taking some action and doing that. That's great. But I think that nothing happens until the judiciary does something. And it doesn't have to be all the time. It doesn't have to be, hey, they called me a name in a deposition. But if there's sanctions, if there's sanctionable conduct, if somebody files a motion, sanction them.
Seriously, yeah.
Sanction them. That's the only way, I think, that there's going to be a massive shift in how lawyers
A couple of things I'll say about that. First of all, it depends on where you are. If you're in state court, you're dealing with judges who are elected or appointed.
Right.
And their concern is they're going to make somebody upset, and they're going to have to run for a re-election against somebody.
Well, that's a different podcast.
Same thing.
Different issue. Okay, well, we can talk about that.
That's a systemic problem. That's what I'm saying.
Systemic issue.
Yeah.
Federal judges are like, I'm not dealing with this, unless it happens in my courtroom where it's affecting what I'm doing. If you guys are out there yelling and screaming at each other or not following the rules, I'm not that concerned unless it's affecting my docket, okay? And the other thing I will tell you is that I sometimes blame both sides, because what happens is actions cause reactions, and I don't react. And I'm not saying like I'm better than anyone else. I just talk about this all the time. So I'll give you a perfect example. One time a lawyer was in a case and sends me a letter. First letter I get from this lawyer telling me all the things I'm going to do, okay? And I wrote back and I said, was this letter meant for me?
Right, he was telling you the things that you're going to do.
That I'm going to do.
A letter to Brian saying this is what Brian's going to do.
I represent so-and-so, you represent so-and-so. Here's what you need to do. Like very directive towards me.
Telling you.
Yeah, not like an introductory, just like he could have picked up the phone and said, hey, listen, here's what I'm trying to do, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it was a bankruptcy case where they were clawing back property from my client. right? So he could have just said, hey, listen, we're trying to get this property, you know. Instead, he sends me a letter, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it was really kind of nasty. Didn't know I knew who the lawyer was, but I'd never met him before. It was an email, and I sent him back, and I said, was this email meant for me? That's all I said. A couple of days later, his associate calls me, had a very nice conversation. And I said, look, okay, I'll do this. Yeah, let's do this. We worked everything out. It was all fine. So I think lawyers need to, the worst thing you can do, it's like a 2-year-old. Ignore them. Ignore them. And lawyers don't do that. When you
So you're saying not the worst thing you can do is ignore them.
Right.
You should ignore them.
You absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
You don't ever react on the level that you're getting the communication.
100%.
You know? And look, don't pick up the phone when it rings. Don't answer the text the minute it comes in. Let people wait a little bit, okay? Because these are the kind of people, they feed off of a response.
Right.
And they feed off of the kind of response they expect, and don't give it to them.
Yeah. I also think, I like to change the mode of communication. So like if they send a letter, I'm going to respond by email. Or if they send an email, I'm going to pick up the phone and call them, just because you need to somehow change the dynamic here. And the dynamic they're engaging in is an email war.
And
I'm
I
not
know
going to do
you're
that.
a big fan of this. And it's one of my top 10 things that I just did in this video for the bar, where I say, pick up the phone.
Yeah, no, I agree.
There was a case once where a lawyer for an insurance company sent subpoenas to like 10 different lawyers for their files. And 2 of the lawyers called me and hired me. And I look at the subpoena and I call the lawyer. And he answers the phone and he says, listen, before we talk about this, I just want to tell you something. You're the only lawyer who's called me. Everyone else has sent me all these nasty letters about what they're going to do. They're going to go to court and file protective orders and this. I said, what do you need? I never had to turn over the files. Never. After having the conversation with him, I never turned over a single thing. It like all got worked out. But he said to me, you are the only lawyer who picked up the phone and called me. Everyone else sent me these nasty letters.
Right. Yeah.
So first thing I do in a case, whether if I'm suing or I'm being reach out, right? Always reach out, and you'll get a sense then of you may sort of bridge a gap. They may all be hot and bothered, but you're right. And then I have a case now where they will send emails and they're strong. But we always pick up, we talk to them and it's super civil, everything's fine on the phone, and we make progress.
Yes.
Big because people, it's almost like, I use the term beer muscles. Like in an email, I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say, and I can type it and send it, and it's strong. Yeah. And, but you talk to them or you're in front of them, whether it's on video or in person, and they are completely different.
Yeah.
So
I think video is even better now, because now they have to look at you in the eye, and it's not that easy to be mean. Looking at someone in the eye.
I agree.
You can be direct, but you don't have to be
unreasonable, a jerk, mean, whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I have a status conference today in a case. It's the first status conference we have. And I emailed the lawyer and I said, hey, call me a half hour before the status conference so we can talk about the status conference. And his response was so positive. He's like, absolutely, I'd love to talk to you. Like, we're going to talk about what we're going to do at the status conference. And the status conference is probably going to be 10 minutes shorter because we're going to have this conversation.
I like it.
Well, it's communication.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, what it comes down to, right?
Yes. On the phone.
Why are you waiting until a half hour before the status conference?
Because it's a quick, set a date kind of thing. Yeah.
But it's, yes, on the phone, but it's also how you communicate, not just the mode of communication, right? Yeah. So everything is, whether it's in writing or whether it's over the phone, it's why are you going in with this, hey, I need to make the lawyer's life difficult? If your focus is, I need to do what's best for my client, right? To me, that's how civility comes together and works.
Well, but I'll tell you something else that I talk about, and that is becoming the alter ego of your client. And that is a dangerous thing that lawyers do. Yeah. I have clients who come in and they say to me, their bar case has progressed a little bit, and they go, I hate this bar counsel, and I want to go after this bar counsel. And I'll say, well, he's a really nice guy. I have a really good, and I don't get hired on the case, right? Because what the lawyer wants is they don't want to address the substantive nature of why they're in trouble. They're like, this is his fault. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I mean, there's some people I don't like, but I'm a professional. Like the law's there and the procedure is there, and I'm not going to get into it with them for the purpose of making my client happy.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, when we started off this conversation by you saying that the Florida Supreme Court is prosecuting cases of incivility. Which ones are getting prosecuted and how are they coming before the Florida Supreme Court?
So
this got to be egregious.
It's a great question and this just got discussed because this is a national trend. And so there, as you can imagine, are lawyers who are concerned about Well, where's the line, right? When am I going to get prosecuted by the bar for incivility?
Those that have that concern are the ones that need to be prosecuted.
Right. And the example I give is I used to have a client who was very abrasive in court, like so bad with prosecutors and judges. He was constantly getting in trouble, being held in contempt all the time. He could not control himself. And I represented him for years. And one day he said to me, he said, "Can't I say F you to a prosecutor?" And I said to him, I can do that, because if I do that, the prosecutor's going to pull me aside and say, "Everything okay? Like, are you all right?" Because that's not my nature. It's your nature to do this, so you can't do it. So once you've developed a pattern of this behavior, that's when it burgeons to the top. So the Florida Bar just filed a complaint on Friday against a lawyer, Thursday, 3 separate cases of incivility where the lawyer was impugning a judge and rude in a deposition and used foul language somewhere else. And it's like obvious, like there's an issue here. So it's not the one-off, what I call the bad day. Like a lawyer had a bad day. That happens. It's a pattern of incivility that's going to get, I have not seen a complaint from the bar that Joe called the lawyer an a-hole, and so we're filing this bar complaint. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So going back to one of the things you said earlier in the podcast, and that is that lawyers are lawyers all the time. Talk about that for a minute, because I think younger lawyers, older lawyers too, to some extent, don't really understand that and what that really means and what the bar can do to you if you're not practicing, but something happens outside of the practice.
A lawyer once said, your practice is not your walk from your car to the courthouse and back. It's the minute you leave your house, when you go to the drive-thru to get coffee, when you go to the pharmacy, when you go to the supermarket, when you're on an airplane, valet parking, everything you do sets an example. And the issue we have now is that unless you've had a good experience with a lawyer, you've had a bad experience with a lawyer, or you've just watched too much television, you have a negative attitude about lawyers. So we constantly have to be in a place where we are setting an example for the public. And the perfect example I'll give you, one night I'm waiting for my car at valet parking, and there's an older gentleman with his wife there, and I can hear him kind of getting into it with the guy at valet parking about the fact that the price of valet parking was not on the podium, and it was more money than he wanted to pay. And he starts kind of having this heated argument that results in, "I'm a lawyer, I know the law, I'm going to go after you." And he's like threatening this guy. And I'm sitting there thinking like, man, this is so embarrassing for me as a lawyer that he's doing this. And of course I went up to the guy, I go, "Listen, I'm a lawyer and he's got nothing, so don't worry about it." But it's like when you do that, and I see that all the time. I see lawyers who get arrested and they're like, "I'm a lawyer." And I'm like, "Oh, no, please. You just elevated the situation."
Or they say that I pay your taxes and to a police officer.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So those moments, look, it's more understandable that you would be in court and maybe say something that you're not supposed to say because you're angry, or you say something to opposing counsel because you're upset about something. That's outside of the pattern of just you can't be civil. But what I get bothered by is in public when I see lawyers abusing people and then announcing that they're a lawyer and some hellfire is going to happen. They're going to lose their job, because it's just, that's what people are like. That's what a lawyer does. They threaten people. They yell at people. And it bothers me. It should bother all of us.
Yeah, no, I agree. Incivility by one, taints all of us. And it's also, I know we're talking about not in the courtroom or not in connection with the case, but I just don't believe that it advances the case really ever anyways, being uncivil to the other side.
No, and I think you need lawyers to explain that to clients, like in family law, right? We all get these emails. "Who's the toughest family lawyer?" And I'm like, hold on.
I do get that request more than
we all get that request.
With family.
Who's the most aggressive divorce lawyer you know?
Divorce lawyer,
right?
Yeah.
I want to go after my spouse for everything they have. And sometimes I'll talk to the person, I'll be like, "How long have you been married?" "Oh, 5 years. And what do you have? You have like 7 IRAs and 4 vacation homes, or do you have an apartment and a dog or something? Like, what is it?" You don't need that, and you shouldn't do that. And I try to explain them how the process should work. But clients sometimes think that lawyers are there to fight, not to resolve. And I always say, listen, I'm here to resolve your case. If I have to fight, I will, but that's not how I'm going into this. I'm going into this thinking, is there a way for me to resolve this? If I can't, then what I tell clients is I'm going to put my good suit on and I'm going to go to court and I'm going to fight. but I'm going to do it professionally and ethically. I'm not going to like go after the prosecutor or the bar counsel. I'm not going to yell at the judge. I'm not going to start threatening people, because what does that do? But clients sometimes thinks that that's what we do.
They see it on TV, movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Brian, last question. When should a lawyer call you? Because I always hear about lawyers who got a bar complaint. They're like, oh, I'm just going to handle it myself. Like, how does a lawyer know when they need to hire you?
I just got interviewed about this, and it was a great interview. And the reporter was asking all these questions about why do lawyers represent themselves in these matters? And I say, well, because they think they're smart. They think they know they're in the situation, they can get themselves out of it. But the problem is they're emotionally attached. So they say things they shouldn't say. They do things they shouldn't do. They don't follow the procedures. And there's a couple times in a lawyer's life when they should call me. A, when they're thinking about something that may be an issue. They have a question about something, because sometimes they can just pick up the phone. I can just say, yeah, here's the rule, or here's a case, or whatever. Sometimes they need a stronger consultation. They want me to review documents, and they have some major issue going on. But when a lawyer gets a complaint from the bar, to me, that's like almost getting arrested. It's like, that's the time to say, listen, I need someone else to look at this. And even if it's not hiring me, they should talk to another lawyer. I tell lawyers this all the time. Listen, if you don't have the money to hire counsel, that's fine. But you should at least go to another lawyer that you trust and say, listen, I have this complaint. Here's my draft response. What do you think about it? Does it look okay? Am I saying the right things? But lawyers like to fire off letters like we were talking about. So I think the minute the bar contacts you, you should call a lawyer.
Yeah.
He who represents himself as a fool for a client.
Boom. I think we're done right there. Thank you, Mr. Amron. That was excellent.
I like it.
Brian, thank you. Thank you for being our first guest and our second.
That made
our
my
last.
day.
Is this our last?
Thank you so much. I'm going to tell that story repeatedly.
You have had a profound impact on this podcast and these men who are before you. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. If you enjoyed this episode of The Practice, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, share the show with your friends and family, help others find it, and help us bring back Brian Tannebaum for our 3rd episode.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Nelson.
Nelson, thank you. Brett, Brian, thank you.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit fastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @fastamron.